I'm aware, but taking it down, and you'll find that a small little trough will appear there, and people will be sitting in all the other chairs. So.
Yeah, there's the back of my head. Díomh agus fáilte romh. We're in for a lovely evening is tócha. There was a little bit of a technical shitstorm earlier, and that projector up there stopped working, so that's why we have this big column structure now. And the lads, I must say, were very professional and efficient in getting this other set up. So apologies if you're sitting kind of in the centre or on this side, it might be a bit annoying. So there are spaces, feel free to move around if you want to see where you have a better view. I'm going to introduce our first poet this evening. And I'm just going to read literally directly from this. I apologise with the biogs. I think the poems will speak for themselves anyway, and the poets, no doubt, will speak for themselves. I was a bit of a stalker of the first poet this evening, Rónán ó Snodaigh, Fadó agus ag Sean Ceol, the Keela. Myself and a gang, we would have followed them around Ireland on many a trip. But writing songs is essentially writing poetry. So I was very excited when Luas Gadán was published in 2003 because it was a beautiful collection of those words written by Rónán. Is Fila agus is Ceoltóirí Rónán ó Snodaigh, most famously known as founder and frontman for the band Keela. In 2003, his first book, Luas Gadán, was published, a collection of Irish language songs, followed later by his book of English lyrics songs. His first collection of poetry, The Garden Wars with Cushcame, was published to critical acclaim, and he has copies of that. Tá cópan ar fáil sa tiopa anocht agus an leabhar déanaí uaig tá cópan ar ar fáil anocht as well. So Rónán will tell you all about that. Rónán, I'm very excited. Tá fáilte bórrót. Gnairi leat agus buin súp as an léhora.
Good meal of all good. Example with me, will Shassaman, I just want to get the voice right. So Tonadant is short or sparely, you know. Ní screen my Dante and Tomer Fod being me screen of lyrics and stuff, but I was even saying it earlier, it told me when I'm really driven a bit past my capacity to handle things, that I resort to poetry. I kind of tend to avoid poetry if I can, you know. So Laid me on Céad Dawn, I suppose, and Paul asked me to do something, some Filiach Dem Leano hen town here in Cork. I tripped up over myself and it stayed with me. But sometimes if you look you look behind you into the rear view mirror, you can see where you might have left things a bit untidy. So I'll read the first poem called The Garden Wars. I wrote it about 10, 12, something years ago. And it took me till now to clean up my mess. You'll understand as I go on. I've been spending some time in the garden, out in the open air, watching the monumental wars between the Bracken and the Gorse over earth, stick and stone. The Bracken took the left hill, the Gorse took the right, and they went head to head this summer in holy war and slaughter. And now they who once dominated the highest hill are decimated to a twig this winter. Their mangled corpses are walked back into the dirt, ground down, beaten and broken. But another will rise wherever one falls, and that'll be a lesson to one and all. And the Ferns tried to use the war to disguise their advance as they strategically encircled the hawthorn ahead of the hungry ivy who presumes to police all things in the shade. And the rushes hold their turf and rough it up, and woe to any rhododendron that gets mixed up in this mess. This is no mere disagreement. This is actual war. And the Gorse likes his own company and defends his place in the sun, but under attack he'll lash back at each and every one. He has very few friends on the hill. Everyone tries to grow around him, and he's not afraid to overstretch and go in for the kill. And the Bracken panicked under fire and made an alliance with the Doc, who came to his side in the autumn with a militia of nettles. But the Bracken hates the nettle and has always done so. They have fought and killed and died at war too many times before. And a battalion of briars have spilt over the border, breaking last year's treaty with an army of thistles, and are as ever well prepared, primed to spring an ambush and launch an all-out assault, which could change the shape of things to come for the rest of them down here under the sun. And the Heather sides with neither. Well, she knows each one is as selfish as the other. She has shared her bed with both of them before, but not this time, and not in this valley. She has her own seeds to sow, and this is no way for them to grow. And the gorse has the upper hill for now. Wasps patrol the banks and the borders, but the bracken are back and beginning to win on the ground, and one by one they'll tear those bushes down. Now it's only land, they're only plants, it's only earth and it's only stone, but earth is thicker than blood down here. This is where they call home. The grass tries to keep the peace in the common ground in between. She has no concept of friend or foe and isn't moved by fear. She leads by example and grows everywhere, the left hill, the right hill, and the hill over there. But all the while the mosses smile unnoticed underfoot, expanding their evergreen empire, claiming all they touch is their own, tree, trunk, clay and stone. Only a matter of time and everything will be mine. So Shin Shin, that's called the Garden Wars. Sometimes it takes a lot out of me to contain all of this stuff, but you know, it's a number of years later, and I thought there's something I didn't attend to. So I'll try now. It's called When Peace broke out in the garden. Just have to compose myself for a second, get me breath so I don't start shaking and stuff. What a concept, no? Peace. All right, I'll give it a go. Once upon a time there was a field, and in the field there was a valley, and in the valley there was a garden, and in the garden there was a war. The plants turned on each other. There was a time of terrible trouble and tormentation. It went on from generation to generation, and the world watched helplessly in horror as the war was waged. The bracken and the gorse were the main source of the irreversible rage that roused the wrath of the rabble in this little scratch of earth. And it went on and on in a spiral for far too long for either one to be able to win anything that could ease the hurt and the pain that they inflicted on each other. And it looked like it would go on like that forever, and all the other shrubbery had to learn to live with it, fit in or fight it out. Until a council of peace was formed over in the neighbouring fields, chaired by the ash, the oak and the alder, mediated by the wren, the robin and the rook. And the efforts to create negotiations was undertook. The wren and the robin had been covertly carrying messages between the bracken and the gorse all winter long, unbeknownst to anyone, in the hope that some kind of discourse would lead to a ceasefire of sorts, which could make room for negotiations to take place. All military ranks from all plants were stood down, and there they stood, head to head, hood to hood, stick to stick, stalk to stalk, and no one dared blink and no one dared talk. Hardened veteran soldiers, stoically awaiting to carry out their orders, kill or be killed trying. Even the wind held her breath as the mists of perspiration arose from the valley floor. That said, the tension from these talks was nearly unbearable. The promises of peace were nearly too painful to hope for. The whole field was focused on this for now. This was the last throw of the dice. Waves of whisperings were heard from the tops of the trees. The bracken threw a truly defiant shape out there in the open, thin, gaunt, shattered souls, with long crooked shadows standing down as erect as their brittle limbs will allow, half hung and haunted looking, clinging to the corpse of their cause. But the blunt, brutal truth that war can never bear fruit isn't lost on them either. Even as they fall to their deaths upright, as they often have done, just to teach their young how to die in absolute defiance. That said, they did eventually advance to the rear and lay their arms down for the peace talks to continue this year. And the gorse looks every bit as terrifying and uncompromising as he intends to look. he stands stout, strong and proud, an unbroken presence in a fortress of thorns. Even the wind tries to blow around him as she exhales, but the bite of last winter's bitter northern gales had burnt back a young bushel of his younger shrubs, and now he just didn't feel that good. He too let a few of the long grasses grow between them to soften some of those blows between them. The snowdrop set the scene early one morning in late January, appearing so still on the hill, up out there in the frozen cold, standing vigil over the latest corpse in this pitiful, protracted war, their heads bowed in solemn prayer, and from the tips of their petals fell tears. Forming a pool at their feet, cut through the frost. And ran like a river straight down the valley floor. Now, nothing could ever be as it was before. They had made a point of being seen standing up out there in the frozen cold, while the hail and sleet turned to rain. As if in a dream, making a river of a stream, they rushed on ahead to wake up the weary down the war-torn valley in the war-torn field. And a parish of purple archangels began their day as they do, with a prayer. A binding prayer. A prayer that can combine everyone's prayers. And the primroses responded with light blossoms, still slightly afraid to stand out too much. But the bluebells were the first to fully feel what it was to answer this call, as they arose up together, one and all, imploring the bracken not to go back to war. The sun was rising to shine, when suddenly everything went silent. There was a pause in the talks. The shadow of the hill fell back on the field. The cold returned, carried by the teeth of the wind, like a reminder of those last bits of frost still hidden in behind the stones, like doubts in their shadows, unhealed wounds, unburied lies, unresolved vendettas and dark insinuated threats. And the gorse blamed the bracken, and the bracken blamed the gorse, of course, back and forth and back and forth. And the blossoms began to fall from the blackthorn tree as the plants were making plans for a return to war. The rooks were called in from the neighbouring fields. They spread out and fanned about, taking time to listen to all the warring parties' hedgemasters' concerns, of which there were many. Fear came to the fore. There could be worse in store, and until enough promises of peace were pronounced, armaments buried, prisoners released, it was back to killing and war, as they were before. But eventually those rooks formed a parliament in the garden, and it brought back the basis of a negotiation at a negotiating table. There was nowhere else to go. This was the only show. And sometimes the current of focused commotion can create the flow of forward motion. And so it flowed. But negotiating peace between war and wildflowers isn't and never has been easy. Some plant types are better suited to a life of strife. The thistle, the nettle, or the briar, for example, they don't seem too keen on this push for peace. Their separate strongholds have been hard fought for, and they're bound by solemn oaths to defend them. Any peace agreement will have to include their unassailable right to bear stings, bristles, and thorns. And the thistle intends to carry on regardless, agitating his way through the outcrops. As long as he has prickles, he'll keep on being a thistle, and he'll hustle and hassle and bustle and battle anyone and anything that dares to grow around him. And the nettle will have questions to answer if the peace talks are to hold, like his behaviour in around the rushes and how his being there was all for their own protection. Just mightn't wash anymore. They've been trading in pain for too long. And everyone's just too sore. And the briar, or the bramble as she likes to be addressed, bristles with seething malcontent and irritation at every word uttered by the ash, the oak and the alder. Easy to pontificate about the benefits of peace when you're 50 feet above the rest of us, mere survivors down here in this God-for-Jesus-in valley. You mind your peace, pal. and I'll mind mine. And some of the more extreme elements of the dandelion are spitting fury too. Peace was never what they were fighting for. Peace was never their designated destination. They claim that this is their domain, and they and only they have the God-given right to barge about the valley, to barge about the field in the months of March, declare dominion over both sides of the valley and give the garden a good going over. And as ever, the existential threat of a ragload of Bucalons getting overly interested in this area doesn't make any of this any easier either. I can only say what I see, and the secret settlements that will have to be made to bind this cessation of hostilities are just that, secret. Only the funguses well below the undergrowth truly know. Used to be who's, and what's to come and what's to go. And the worms will never tell what they've been told not to tell. But the word got out from the silent talks that the war was to be called off and peace was to be declared in the garden. And so peace was declared in the garden. And immediately a flush of daisies appeared and the hill began to blush a little. The sun climbed higher in the sky. The rooks flew back to the neighbouring fields and absolute pandemonium ensued. No one knew what to do. Would you believe it? Was it actually true? Dandelions appeared to hover around, daring to dander about in the demilitarised zones, a few first and then by the dozen. The hawthorn burst into flower, covered herself in white, pink, soft, light blossoms. The bluebells beamed deep silent sighs of relief, undulating like a murmuration of starlings. This was what they had been praying for. Buttercups began popping their heads up here and there unannounced. Even the plantains with their soldiery airs started to sway a bit. The higher they got, the more they forgot to be standing straight and looking so serious. And the rushes rejoiced righteously and drank deeper with every sup, savouring each and every wave of relief that washed over them. Irises appeared at the other end of the field, indicating some activity from a deeper water source. And the wild garlic resurfaced in around the back of the bracken, like a brass band honking their horns. They knew that this was it. They knew that this coming summer would go down in history. This was it. This was the shit. This is the moment when winter turns to spring. Spring turns to summer. War becomes peace. Peace becomes normal. Night turns to day. Frost turns to river. And time turns to rhythm. And that just goes to show that the divine drive to grow that's in every living thing can only be held back for so long, no matter how important or urgent your war is. And the long and short grasses have stayed up every night for days on end, putting their arms around everyone. Over the moon and under the sun, each moment the happiest moment of their lives. And most of the dandelions truly believe now. Whip off their tops and get completely out of their heads, as dandelions do all over the place. And the purple archangels have stayed and prayed, even after the snowdrops have gone to ground. And they intend to stay and pray until the prayer is done. There's plenty to pray for. No one won. And all the plants will have to learn to grow alongside each other now, without recourse to force or the threat of it. It won't be easy, but it will be peace, and it's holding and unfolding as we speak. And yes, of course, there's issues to resolve in the undergrowth. It's said that the briar has the ivy in around the back of the blackthorn tree with one of her sharpest thorns to her throat. The ivy, for her part, claims she was never in receipt of any kickbacks or backhanders or any dark arts back in the day. But theirs is an old quarrel from a time long before the beginning and ending of this worn out war. And the word is out in amongst the wildflowers in the neighbouring fields that the war is over for good. And the valley is open for growing in. Rich soil, high in nutrients, reasonable drainage, east-west facing, long-suffering, patient neighbours, sheltered but not too shady. And the mosses absorb it all, but not with their usual smug self-assurance. They've lost a lot of foothold in this field, what with the unrelenting upsurge in young, vigorous growth bursting at the seams, since peace broke out in the garden of the valley in the field. Guramila Margaret. I told Paul I'd sing one song, and I'm going to leave it at that. If I had a zip, I'd put it across me gob about now, and I'd just be all ears for the rest of the night. But thanks a million. It'll take me, I know. Yeah, it's all right now, is the gist of why I wrote that. I just, and I want people to hear it as well. It's all right, like. Right, Shin Guramila Margaret, thanks for listening and paying attention. I thought I was going to trip up along the way there a few times. I was even telling Paul, the way I learn it off by heart is I pace, I walk up and down the kitchen. No kids in the kitchen, give me 2 hours, boom, 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 boom. But that's just a nervous disposition, so it's hard to stand still in front of the mic here. Then I'm hour on, and I don't want to be taking up too much time, but I said I'd do an hour on. So bhí mé in Paris sort of harla on COVID, better trí bhliain in Paris, and I met a Cork man, and we had I shouldn't be saying this, some of you probably know him, but it's the truth. We had an instant dislike of each other, Oh yeah. yeah. So you can egg him on and says, yeah, we saw him, you're dead right. But and I like that, I kind of like that. I'm interested in someone that completely doesn't like me, and I don't like them either. So we sat and had breakfast looking at each other, every morning. You know what I mean? Like, he was going to go off, and I wasn't going to back down, you know what I mean? So I'd take me thing over, sit at his table, and be, yeah, are you ready we're going to go off again? So, truth is, he's an absolutely amazing fella. And I don't know what little juvenile sense of whatever masculinity I have that makes me, want to meet people in a sort of a confrontational way, but shin, maybe it's a city thing. But he held his own. So his name is Commandant Dan Harvey, right? He's in charge of some big stuff. And he's been over in the Lebanon being in charge of big stuff for about 16 years, So now I can see all your minds gone, Jesus, you're a cheeky little shite. What were you doing in Iron But maybe it's a Cork Dublin thing. I think that's all good. I don't think people should be backing down from each other. But we had to leave early because the COVID was just happening at the time. So we came back, but he told me before we left, he says, look, write a song for the peacekeepers, will you? And I says, I will, and it'll take me a while. It took me a bit, but he says, we don't get half as much PR as we could be getting, and we represent you very well. That's some hardcore stuff, isn't it? Like, and the more you look into that, you think about all them lads out there. There's no one as well behaved as what we have standing. Do you know what I mean? Like 60 miles down the road, everyone's gone fucking mad, like. And then all the gobshites in the fucking news telling you, you're not allowed to think that, you're not allowed to say, the fuck? So, confronted with that mad, hellish fucking stuff. It's amazing to know that we have representation up there on the border, and I'm terrified for them. They're all young fellas, like, but they really hold their nerve. They're a true testament to what everyone should be doing. Imagine, do you know what I mean? Anyway, so screaming out on should, then the lads, more George, Dan Lum out on a scribe. I'm not sure if Dan even likes the song. I sent it to him last month, he never wrote back to me. Do you know what I mean? He could be just breaking my balls on a long distance jobby now. Do you know? So anyway, I should have rang him and said I was here. But Colin out on should then a buchli, agus na Colini, oglig oram na heron. Sé an chéad rud é atá den bhd an sa do honna an ná múr dain harlingteisteach go bon na bhlag. Sé an dara rud atá den bhd an sa do honna an ná múr dain san a scuilar a seamach ó clíomh do bhrolach. On san by to ré le dolle play le pay rodé atá le play le os de choramach mór hímpelart tef hierdit fui da van os da chom de hív clay de hív jas on het heen ider hoe is da hímpelacht biocht de gloese geer de huila ferach de agana saler de gosse voet maar vrewiga de galaf ser de roelen ganchanes is toch riek boele gobog das maul socorre. Le frasteler na fraglachti het am goed gesort. Le diero John le doel geschiet af wie goormagot. Tara atale toert, on misnach atale kossend, on behor atale schul, on balacht atale bronne, on ford atale kasse. On she chana tala scapa, she is street cree lar, bonagus borda anam. On la, so amach is on die who, dan doe he on a duggan too, dan a dini lanavan too, dan pobble a vag too, dan tubber and her banig too, dan clown a choig too, dan credav lana chredden too, Done down in her toe go to in some toe anish.
Fair cuachtach, Rónán. That's a beautiful example of how poetry can be both beautifully simple and deeply complex all at once. We're going to go on to our next guest poet, Dylan. Hello. I was having a chat with a few people earlier and they are incredibly excited, as I am, to hear your work tonight. I did hear you read once before. I can't quite remember where. Maybe when I hear your voice again, I'll remember. We don't have copies of your book tonight, Dylan, but maybe I know the latest is from Banshee Press, so you might let us know where we can get your work. So Dylan Brennan, dividing his time between Mexico and Ireland, is a recipient of the Ireland Share of Poetry Bursary Award. That sounds very fancy. I'm going to go for that myself sometime. His second collection, Let the Dead, 2000 this year, is available now from Banshee Press. Without further ado, Dylan, fáilte rót agus go naorí leat.
Thank you so much. First of all, can you hear me? All right, good stuff. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that, Rónán. That was fantastic, but I'll give it a go. So I'm mostly going to be reading from this book. Let the Dead, published by Banshee this year. And my editor of this book is in the room there with you, Jessica Traynor. She did a great job on this. Hi, Jess. Looking forward to hearing you read. So I'm going to start with a poem that I wrote maybe about 9 years ago. And it's a reworking of an old anonymous Irish poem that in its English form was called The Mother's Lament at the Slaughter of the Innocents. And I wrote it just after 43 student teachers were murdered in Mexico. And it's a poem that I kind of wish was irrelevant, but while I keep seeing dead children and babies on my screen every time I go online, I'm going to keep reading this poem. It's called And What Is My Heart? And a woman said, my breasts are milkless, my eyes are damp, my skeleton is frail, it rattles. And what I want is this. I want you to kill me now instead. And another woman said, what am I without my child? And what is my heart? From this day till the last, a cold clot of blood. It would be nice if that poem had no sort of relevance to current affairs, but as I say, while it does, I'll keep reading it. I'd like to read one now from my first book, Blood Oranges, which is pretty much impossible to find. I think you can get it on Kindle, and that's about it. But if you get in touch with me, maybe I'll find a PDF for you if you need. So this poem, it's called Bones of Anonymous Children. And I had some help writing it. It's co-written by Father Fintan Monaghan, who used to be the secretary for the Archdiocese of Tuam, unwittingly co-written. What happened was I was living in a place called Cholula in Mexico, and I was walking around the ruins of one of the biggest pyramids on earth. And off to the side, I found a little plaque talking about an altar where they found evidence of sacrificed children probably sacrificed to the rain god Tlaloc. And then I went home and I found an article online in the Guardian, I think it was, about Tuam and the hundreds of babies out there. And I just started thinking about the links across time and ocean, but the links between religion and how we treat our most vulnerable. And so Father Fintan has a quotation in the middle of this poem. Hopefully you can spot it. So here we go. Bones of Anonymous Children. At the southwest corner of Tlachihueltepetl, the skeletal remains of 2 sacrificed children were unearthed. There was evidence of cranial irregularities, deformed baby skull smashed for ritual. Everyone knew the stainless souls of the very young were the messengers that Tlaloc could never refuse. When rains fell hard upon Cholulan farms, it was clear the murder of youngsters was a necessary horror. It made sense. It had purpose. I suppose we can't really judge the past from our point of view, from our lens. All we can do is mark it appropriately and make sure there is a suitable place here where people can come and remember the babies that died. And so it is marked at the foot of arguably the largest pyramid on the planet, church plonked atop, and tourists can know the ancient evils of sacrifice. A child asks a guide why the pyramid with its trees and grass and squirrels looks still like a hillock. He is told, and the adults listen too, how a proper excavation would untangle the muscular roots of millennial trees, upsetting the soils of gods and men, an unholy mess. The spiritual and physical constructs of all those years will come crashing down around us. We'd never clean that up. Thank you. So that was Bones of Anonymous Children from my first book, Blood Oranges. The rest of the reading will be from Let the Dead. And so I hope you're sitting comfortably. I'm going to read one of the longer sections here. I've never read it for an audience before, and maybe I never will again. So here we go. It's in four, but I need to give you some context. It's in 14 sections. It's called Tamaulipas Amergin. And just a little bit of context. I mean, I'm sure you know, obviously, in the 19th century, many Irish people emigrated to the States, escaping the famine. And a lot of those men ended up joining the military or became policemen. You know, 3 meals a day seemed like a good job. And so some of those soldiers joined the US Army right when it looked like USA was going to go to war with Britain over Oregon. That didn't happen. Next thing they know, they find themselves down on the border, the southern border, getting ready to invade Mexico. A small number of them switched sides and fought for Mexico against the USA, and they became known as the St. Patrick's Battalion, or El Batallón de San Patricio. So I read a few books about this, and I was fascinated, you know, being an Irish person living in Mexico. And I thought, well, I can't write a straight history narrative of this because it's already been done, and it's been done quite well. And so I started to write these sort of lyrics, and I brought in a few bits and pieces of anonymous old Irish poetry, some bits of James Joyce, even the Book of Job, and also the famous Amergin poem, Amergin being the mythical first poet in Ireland. And his famous poem, you know, I am the salmon in the pool, I am the stag in the field, that kind of stuff. And so I just wanted to capture the sense of sort of confusion, displacement, and a surreal sense of bewilderment. So I'll read through the whole thing, take a few minutes. Here we go. Tamaulipas Amergin 1. A Song of Amergin. I'm the blue land crab lost near the salt marsh. I'm the phantom islet that's appeared on your map, poured out like water darkness. I'm the mangrove that gropes through the delta for soil, brackish ripples near the swollen beachwort. I'm a sick thing forming in your drinking water. I'm your dream of the semi-desert, a cold river taking hold in your mouth. I'm the shaved head of your friend in the pit. I'm a cloth of worms. I'm that addled flesh, calligraphy on your chest that moves in the night. I'm the turkey vulture that circles over thorns grove. I'm the blackberry blossom that trembles in drizzle. I'm the marrow that's needed to moisten your body, the fresh white of an egg. I'm the green dampness of a fertile valley, the rain that's been withheld. I'm the last living ghost sitting down among ashes, if only his thoughts were printed in a book. I'm the Christmas cactus with its scarlet flecks. I'm a frail enough thing to be broken like a twig. I'm a jawbone thrown on the heap. I'm the silt that separates one nation from another, and the sodden black harvest of a gaunt island. 2. The river before war. Boys and men from both sides would bathe in the river before war, stepping on the same sediment, so close they could touch, bobbing and rising lightly in the swell and pull of the enemy's ripples, sleeping in their camps with the river inside them, in their hair and under fingernails. 3. Why I cross the river. My waterlogged country, its softened edges begin to fade from memory. An ink of feathers across the surface, blackbirds disguised as bathing women. A hedge before me, I long for an island, a land full of stars. I'm as ruthless as I'm poor. At least there'll be music down there and a softer bed. I'm fragile, damp, and in pain. The sweetest thing I imagine, the defeated face of an enemy in an open desert country. The mesquite thorn like grief lodged under the skin, the limitation of horizon. I stir vinegar into my coffee as an antidote to stupor. I travel to my death in silence. 4, desertion. Edge of life. The sturdy corn is green. There is no green darker than a cornfield in the rain. Every dream I have, I crouch to where a woman is sunk in clay. I'm in want of an amulet against loneliness. I pray and the body decays. These mountains tell the distance through mist and foam to desire. Beyond the muscles of the river is a widespread country. I tour this land in bewilderment and see my mother as a buzzard. 5, towards a decision. Light fell over childish eyes. He looked down to the river. When his sight cleared a little, held the waning sunset to his breast in fright. It's so beautiful. Tried to weigh his soul. Dusk flickered upon his shadow. Of course it's beautiful. May you never die till I shoot you. Godspeed from gaunt and spectral men. 6, what he currently desires. A sweet confluence of waters to steep a fevered brain. A light and silver skiff to smooth the wrinkles of the sea. To attain my former rank or die in the trying. Dizzy music and the blaze of the dance. Honey and hazelnuts, fresh milk and pork. An invitation to a pillow, a cure for sorrow, a roof, warmth, and touch. 7, traitor. A sheaf held together in the very dark twilight. Fearing collapse, he slackened his pace. The right side of his head had been injured. No warm soil around exotic feet. Cold and white, he turned gleaming eyes to the grey river and the reality his memory told him. A black iron sky, and no one wanted him. 8, Ishka in Linares. The first time Gaelga was whispered on the streets of Linares must have been the morning they collapsed in the plaza here like famine victims, to gulp at fresh spring water and earn that Colorado's nickname for their burnt skin. After a battering from the enemy just north of Matamoros, where they first began to desert, dodging volleys of musket balls to be welcomed by church bells, though some were not so lucky. Henri Lamb and Carl Gross shot from the bank, and 4 or 5 Catholics in broad daylight headlocked down to the river bottom. I remember another who thrashed about in that border rush that's taken so many. How black and cold and so lonely. 9, La Angostura. Steep the runes of your body in the river like ointment. Scratch our names down there on a rock. 10, the dream before. Web of noise from a convulsed body, a somber halo, pale disk of a face. Large, faint moon, solitary and unique. Small eyes below that seem to meditate. A ravaged brain, a throat, a memory of texture, a tongue. Deep and full, a twilight throbs in the devil hand, a small gold coin. 11, outside Monterey. I crouched to gawp at 2 horses still eating sooty grasses as their entrails slumped out into the morning. 12, the soil is black as the mush of the blighted spuds that drove so many westwards, as black as the coffee outside Monte Morelos, as cold as the endemic species of Nuevo Leon that exist out there in the darkness. Rare variations of goldenrods and Gordon's bladder pods, sparks of yellow, desert flats, gypsum soils, and the needles of the cacti I can see, because I know they are out there pricking at the vapors. Black as the moonless gloom of the Battle of Monterey, the soot on lungs behind cannons at the Citadel, unbreathable clouds from the 12-pound howitzers, grape shot, sandbags, cobblestones, pickaxes, and the corrugated coughs of the boys with yellow fever, of the chlorophyll voids of gaping mouths, of an entire island abandoned by their god to ingest infected pulp, the biles of their sadness dripping back to the soil, cursing the earth, black as hunger and the beating of a man till he stops. 13, far from home. Fresh blue petals, my grief is night blooming. 14, Mami, or Nonansin. Please, Mami, when I die, bury me under the kiln. And when you're baking the bread, you can cry for me there. If a passerby asks, Mrs., why all the tears? Say, the firewood's still damp and the smoke hurts your eyes. Thank you. I need a drink of water after that, hold on. Thank you very much. I should say that last section there, Nonansin, it's based on an anonymous old Nahuatl lyric. And Nonansin kind of means mother, but it's the diminutive form of mother. So that's why I chose Mami. And I just tweaked it a little bit to make it sound a bit more Irish. And I was delighted to see that there's that poem is being displayed in public in Ballincollig Park, a place I've never been, but I'd love to visit someday. So if you happen to be walking around there, you might bump into it. So I'll do a few more poems from this one. Let me just find it now, 1 second. This one is called Bog Cotton. Only hours before the spotting began, we took a walk in the sun and bluster along the northernmost part of our island country and saw the only clouds were the ankle-high tufts that marked out for us like a warning, the softest turf, common cotton sedge or bog cotton. I picked some and so disrupted, destroyed anemophilous potential on that windiest hill brow. Days later now, on the other side of the Atlantic, in our tiny apartment on what were once the shores of a lake island, the dried flowers spill out from my wallet. As I look for a phone number, I hold a perianth up to the morning light and drink hot coffee while you sleep. I place the fragile whiteness on a windowsill saucer by the cacti and succulents to be blown out, carried when the rains come. I'm going to read a poem now called 4 attempts at making a human. And actually, there was a film version of this that was shown at Winter Warmer a couple of years ago. It was shortlisted. We didn't win, but we won in Drumshanbo shortly afterwards. My brother is an artist, Jonathan Brennan, and he made a short film of this one, and he might be making a short film of the poem Tamaulipas Amergin, but we'll see. Watch this space. So this one's called 4 Attempts at Making a Human. And I wrote, it's not after Popol Vuh, because it's not. It has nothing to do with the German ambient rock band called Popol Vuh, but it does have something to do with a book called Popol Vuh, which is a sort of Guatemalan foundational text about the creation of human beings. And the gods, they have to, they go through a few sort of failed attempts to make humans. They try to make them out of clay and wood. It doesn't work out too well. And that was the inspiration for making this poem. 4 attempts at making a human. It's in 3 parts. 1, this is what happened. We made a small person out of mud and placed it down there on the table. Just like the gods, heart of sky. We rolled up our sleeves, heart of sea, to get our hands dirty in the stuff of life. But something went wrong. Its neck wouldn't turn. It just stared up at us, a tiny face with no understanding, a barely pulsating thing. It couldn't worship. Like an overcooked vegetable, it couldn't think. A sort of primal gurgle of lamentation as it dissolved in hot droplets into nothing. 2, there's an old joke about the car made out of wood. Wooden engine and dashboard, wooden wheels. The only problem? It wouldn't start. Something similar here. You see, we are chiseled, framed and shaped in the mouths of our peers, remembered by tongue. And so we did it again. We made a little person, a wooden effigy, and gave it some words. She crawled briefly before stopping, spoke eloquently until her face dried up into a kind of expressionless, desiccated mask. Her arms and legs turned stiff. An unresponsive little body, rigid and cold. No blood flowed within, no oil or sweat. We remembered stories of similar cases, effigy corpses left to be devoured, mouths and faces ruined and crushed, twig bones snapped, ground up for the dogs. And so we kissed her goodbye and submerged the crumbling husk in an organic and fragrant resin before burning. We inhaled the smoke, smeared the ashes on our arms and chests as the whole earth darkened in a thick black rain. And that was that. To remind me of our little wood girl experiment, I keep a single splinter ingrained, a speck I carry with me in the palm of my hand. 3. Ah, my darling wife, we've never been gods. Can't make corn into anything but food. And so it took us a 4th attempt. No, I'll not mention the 3rd. For the expected shock, a flush of rose water in the middle of breakfast. We wove our wildflowers into a sun, a filigree of bog cotton, mouse ear, mayweed, bedstraw, bittercress dampened with sea foam, eyebright and yarrows strengthened with dried strips of henequen. And he was born and lived and grew. The last poem I'll read is a love poem, I suppose. It's called Stoneflower. Away from the acid glow of sulfur crystals, Eve Klein crumble of azurite, translucent gypsum and the glisten of quartz lumps, nestled in a drab cabinet of fossils, a flower I can never give you. 300 million years ago, slowly trapped, dug up in what is now still Ireland. Actinocrinus stellaris. Strange to say, in encyclopedias and online archives, I can find next to nothing other than this extinct genus of the crinoid, from the Greek krinon eidos, form of a lily. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you so much, Paul, for the invitation. Absolute pleasure.
Dylan. It's so wonderful you're able to join us from Mexico like that. That's the beauty of such a hybrid event. I do recommend you get on the first plane back to Cork though and visit Ballincollig, because it's an absolute epicenter of culture and beautiful stuff in Cork. Gurmila Magat, and I think it's clear to see actually, and I hope you agree, that there's real connections between some of your work there and Rónán's work right before you. There were some lovely connections there that I felt, and please don't let that be the first and last time you read that beautiful 14-verse poem. That's really worth sharing and getting far and wide. So Gurmila Magat Dylan, and I do remember that poetry film as well, and I'll definitely be checking it out again. Gurmila Magat. So we're going to continue with our final reader of our poet of this evening, Jessica Traynor. I've had the pleasure of hearing Jessica read her work on a few occasions, and I'm always very impressed and moved. I had a quick chat with Jessica earlier about, the awkwardness of writing your biography and maybe the reasons why you find yourself doing it if you're looking for a job or funding, whatever. And she did say some of it might not be true, so I don't know what is true in this biography I'm about to read and what's not true. We'll figure that out. So Jessica Traynor is the 2023 recipient of Lawrence O'Shaughnessy Award for Poetry. Her third collection, Pit Lullabies by Blood Axe 2022, is a Poetry Book Society recommendation and was an Irish Times Book of the Year and a Guardian Best Summer Read of 2022. So I think if that's true, it speaks for itself. G'nair Rilat Jessica Gurmila Magat.
Yeah, it's all lies, every bit of it. My real name isn't even Jessica. Thank you so much for that, Rónán and Dylan as well. How beautiful to hear those two readings and how they spoke to each other, and just the journeys that they took us on, really deep into the heart of nature. I'm going to read a couple of poems from my most recent collection, Pit Lullabies, and then you will be my guinea pigs for some brand new poems as well. I hope you can hear me okay. I think that sounds like it just got a bit better there. 1 second. So the poems in Pit Lullabies are poems that explore new motherhood and parenthood and the natural world, and also gender politics and violence against women, which is something that I think is in our thoughts recently, along with all of the other various conflicts. More on that a little bit later. But the first couple of poems I'm going to read from the book really deal with something that I kind of felt that I was very eager to explore after having my first daughter, which was the strangeness and the uncanniness of the experience of carrying and giving birth to a child, and also the kind of the various existential crises that we may all have experienced that become very rooted and concrete after you bring another life into the world and are responsible for it. But the first couple of poems I'm going to read are really inspired by those strange, sleepless early days where things can be very beautiful but very surreal as well. And the first poem I'm going to read is Anatomy Scan. Let's begin with a shroud darkened by time, pushed aside to show your bones filigree. The ultrasound probes and digs as you slither in and out of focus, sockets gaping like a Halloween ghost through a sheet. The whole of your stomach, the chomp of your heartbeat hungering below my gut. Perfect cerebellum, a very nice spine. There, the kidneys, little dark pockets of need. Colour flares across the screen, arterial flow through widening chambers, its rush exhausting. The eyeballs orbit, closed but watchful. Your twig arms flinch and flick, your tiny jaws grin. Little lizard, you know something I've forgotten. In the birthing room. The choir sings pitchy and off key, but still my hands grasp, flutter, try to shape these unruly phrases till the drag of morphine collapses them. I can't read the singers' faces behind their masks, and the lighting is bad. Pale green gowns, glinting implements, very postmodern, post-dramatic. But they won't stand still. One soloist bends over me, very quiet, very serious. And the music must be good because I feel something tugging me, a root that shouldn't be disturbed. Don't cry, you're the conductor. Then, for some reason, I'm given a prize, but it's a baby, her eyes black. We look at each other. There must be some mistake before she's taken away. It's quiet when the cleanup team arrives. There is so much blood. I'm sorry, but do you know if I've been cut? Of course you have, they say. The next poem I'm going to read is the first poem I wrote after having my daughter, and it is actually featured in a park in Cork, but I didn't check which one. Paul, which park is it? Off the top of your head now. This is the challenge, you have to find the poem. Fitzgerald Park, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, this was the first poem I wrote in the kind of the first couple of weeks after having my daughter, and it was a very difficult birthing experience, as a lot of first births are. And there was an emergency situation that didn't need to be an emergency situation, so it was all a bit traumatic. But I do remember, after all of the panic, when my baby was handed to me, you know, newborns are these very creaturely creatures, you know, they don't quite look human yet. And she looked up at me with these big kind of black eyes that newborns have. And my first instinctive response to her was one of pity, because she looked like some sort of wild animal that had been taken out of her element and put somewhere where she should not be at all. And then obviously there was great love and all of those things, but I think the shock of our first sighting of each other really stuck with me. And it reminded me of when I was a kid. I used to spend a lot of time trying to tame feral cats in the neighborhood. And the first tentative weeks with a newborn is a little bit that kind of dance back and forth. So this is called If You Can Tame a Wild Cat, You Can Raise a Baby. Lesson 1. You have no shared contexts. Forget sentimentality. The child recognizes you as a fox on a winter's night, hears the owl shriek above it. Lesson 2. Now you have accepted you have no shared context. We should admit 1, the seeking of pattern, repeat, 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 until threat becomes comfort. Lesson 3. Like any animal, this child has the capacity for love. Like any human, you know you deserve only contempt. Lesson 4. The smile is learned. All mirrors are Antarctic wastes, but your breath is warm. Write your message on the glass. Lesson 5. You are both feral, scavengers haunting a night of cutthroat stars. Touch your nose to the frozen earth. Breathe, breathe each other's scent. The next poem I'm going to read is a poem that I was commissioned to write a couple of years ago, and I was asked to respond to Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal, which is a text that I'm always being asked to respond to. I'm not really sure why, but it's a text I find immensely interesting still. And for those of you who don't know it, it's an 18th century satire by Jonathan Swift, where he suggests that a solution to the problem of widespread hunger and famine in Ireland is that the poor should eat their young. And it was shocking then, and it's still shocking today, in the necessary way of all good satire. But when I was asked to write a kind of a contemporary response as part of a series, and Sarah Clancy wrote one too. Actually, Sarah wrote a wonderful poem, and this was for a BBC4 radio documentary a couple of years ago. But in the week that I sat down to write the poem, there were 3 different cases of femicide reported in the Irish media. 2 of them were non-national women, and one of them was an Irish woman. And the disturbing thing about it was, apart from the obviously disturbing elements, was that 2 of these stories fell out of the media, and I could never find anything about them afterwards. And I kind of got to thinking, you know, how do we respond to these events in society? Well, we all know how people responded yesterday, but often there is a great outpouring of grief, especially if the victim is what people consider to be the right kind of victim. And there's a great outpouring of grief, which is a wonderful thing for people to come together, but actually it acts as a sticking plaster. It doesn't address any of the systemic issues. People vent their grief and then everything returns to normal, and these systemic issues are left unaddressed. And violence against women and children is a pandemic all over the world, and it has nothing to do with race. Sorry. And when I was writing this poem, I'm sorry, this intro was always longer than the poem itself. When I was writing this poem, 2 lines from Patrick Kavanagh's poem Innocence kept going round and round and round in my head. And the lines were, ashamed of what I loved, I flung her from me and called her a ditch. So the poem is called A Plea for the Sanctification of the Ditches of Ireland. And one of the women's bodies had been found in a ditch, which is, I think, why the location stuck in my head. In these difficult cases where the death site is unknown, where guesswork festoons each hedgerow, bog hole, car boot in caution tape for a mother sucked through the estuary's throat and into the sea. In these dark times when our men are driven by swallowed sorrows to make a butcher's block of the hearth, the best course of action is to sanctify the sites where these unfortunate women found their rest. If we worship them here, maybe their fractured ribs will knit like a Moses basket to shelter the heart. Contusions to the chest, legs, forearms will fade like darkness licked back into an inky horizon. Broken necks will kink into place with a click as neat as a car boot's closing. And mirrored in the meadow's satin dew will be a host of little virgins, mothers of the field, ditch, cistern. Each little breakneck, each strangled waif will be a May queen, a fly-tipped boreen, her altar, and her voice will pour like honey over the field, sweet as blackbird song, rippling the wooded glen. Oh, raise your hands in supplication, chant her name across the evening in a round. Mother ditch, prepare a bed for us among the nettle leaves. Oh, mother, dip your net for us amongst the choppy waves. Oh, mother ditch, we pine for you until the moon is full, and then we see your face appear in every bog pool. Thank you. Another poem that responds a little bit to, written long before the current atrocities that are being committed against the people of Palestine. But I feel like behind every conflict, there is a room with men talking to each other, making decisions about the fate of thousands of men, women, and children whose lives they will never experience and for whom they have absolutely no empathy. Men are talking. Men are talking to each other, and outside the overheated room, swans stumble, feet bound to the frozen lake. Men are talking to each other, and decapitated stags bellow over the gilt chairs, wailing walls of brocade. Men of state are talking. While the newscaster drones in Greek or Turkish or Russian, the men descant above her monotone. They thrust speech into each other, bodies feats of engineering, legs spread like girders, each handshake a buttress. Outside the hotel, palace, dacha, ice clasps everything in place. Men are talking, by the lake. I wrote a sequence of poems for this book that I haven't read a lot since the beginning of my time reading from this book in 2022. And it's a sequence called On Poisons. And it's very much a sequence where I kind of tried to root some of the existential anxieties I had about the world into this kind of fairy tale, mythological language of plants. And I kind of had a lot of fun with it, but they are dark poems. I'm going to read a few of them tonight. The first one I'm going to read actually was chosen as a poem on the Underground in the UK, which was such a gorgeous thing, but it's such a dark, weird little poem. I think it probably ruined a few commuters' days by accident. So anyway, I'll read a couple of these poems. On Poisons. 1. Ditches. So many songs I could sing you, spread fields of lavender for you to crush in your fists. But there are things more potent than the peaches and plums in your storybooks. There are shadows in the ditch that know your name. Sit with me, I'll teach you theirs. You. Look for me among tumbled stones, trace your fingers over skulls, crossed bones, read the names written there. The sky spins overhead while lichens bloom and rhizomes weave webs between my roots. My children hang from my branches in red jackets. Once, before we withered into silence, my husband sent a blackbird to fill his crop with those berries. The bird's bones hide now among leaf mold and loam, thin as my own fallen needles, stitching year on year. Cuckoo pint. Find a wood and set your child loose to forage flowers and berries. Warn them to steer clear of nettles, of men who travel alone or in packs. Tell them about tetanus, ticks and broken glass, about hypodermic needles and fly agaric mushrooms, blackberries late glazed with glyphosate, carrion laced with rat poison. When you have taught them all the ways the world will break their fingers, close the car door, check your weather app. When they come back, you'll know them by what they bring. If the child carries fistfuls of cuckoo pint, red berries throbbing through the dusk, reflecting light onto their hopeful face, this signifies the child is a bastard and not of your flesh. The clever child will carry nothing but their breath, because the answer to the riddle of what is safe is nothing, no one, nowhere. I'm going to finish my reading from this book by reading a couple of the pit lullabies that give the book its title. And these were poems that I wrote after having my first child, when I was kind of trying to get back to work. And the work of a writer involves a lot of travel and distance. And it was a very difficult time. I found myself kind of very fraught with anxiety at the thought of being away. So I spent a lot of time, if I had to travel, trying to get back either on the first or the last bus. So I spent a lot of time traveling in darkness, and I wrote these poems for and to my daughter while I was in this kind of place. Pit Lullaby 4. When you wake in the dark to find me gone, I'll be standing at the night gate on Glengall Street, the gate you don't notice in daytime until a pied cat slinks through or the hinges whine their small song of neglect. This is the gate that lets the night through, keeps it out. And I'm standing here alone in my green army coat, hair shorn, a woman thinned by so many miles of walking, ready for the ghasts and boggarts that might come through, ready for the moths big as donkeys that crash towards the moon. When you are old enough to join me there, I will ask you, do you want the night gate open or shut? Pit Lullaby 5. Here are some things I need you to know. This darkness is an absence of light and not inklings of foot that fall from space, redacting the sky's pale grey. It's not a cloud of ink announcing the movement deep below of a squid who reaches to grasp the moon's far bead or a knuckle of gall built around us by wasps. It's not a fog released by miners who tunneled here for potash or the surface of a lake beneath the sea where even fish drown. It's the pinprick in your pupil that lets the world in, the mark I make on paper to name you, the space between you and those you love. And this next pit lullaby has a little reference in it to a book called Mog in the Dark by Judith Kerr. And it's a series of kind of children's books. I remember reading them when I was very young about Mog, this forgetful cat. But Judith Kerr is a wonderful writer. She wrote a wonderful memoir of her youth, I think in Vienna. She had to flee Vienna because she was Jewish during the Second World War. And it's called When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit. It's a really beautiful piece. And these Mog books I always enjoyed as a child, and I've enjoyed reading them to my children because, like much of the best children's literature, they do have the seeds of existential crisis within them. And there's this one like really existential crisis line in this poem that I had to steal. Pit Lullaby 7. When we turn off the light and I hold you close, your face becomes a puzzle, a wisp of hair settling on a cheek, an eyebrow like a capstone sinking in a restless sea. Here I whisper to you broken thoughts that settle on the tangle of our limbs. Mog sat in the dark and thought dark thoughts, I say, because it's the only thing in any of your books I recognize as true, a beast alone out of doors and far from home. I lie in the dark and think dark thoughts while your feet push my thighs away. I make a weapon of the weight of my bones. There are so many hours between us and the morning. I'm going to read you a couple of new poems in a second, but I'll finish with the final poem in this book, which kind of serendipitously was the last poem that I wrote when I was putting the book together. And it's a lullaby. It's no longer a pit lullaby. And one of the reasons I kind of wanted to spread the pit lullaby books throughout the poem and finish with this lullaby poem is that I was trying, I suppose, to reflect the experience of postnatal depression and how it's not something that you simply get through in a simplistic way. I think any of these kind of mental health issues that we'll experience through our lives, I think it would be disingenuous to try and squish them into a neat little narrative. So I felt it was honest to finish the book with a lullaby, which is still a nighttime poem, but maybe we're not quite in the pit anymore. Lullaby. I have a lullaby for you at last. So lie beside me, hold my hand, follow me through the night's amber lens to Bull Island. Here the seals are waking from their sleep, rolling into the surf where in blue-black they'll stretch the landig from their muscles. Here the only touch is water. Moonlight on scale, dazzle of bubbles, blubber's cape and fish blood's meager warmth. These are my notes, the strand our stave. Our music rises, unfolds. We are waveform, we are sea. So, a couple of new poems before we finish up. And I'm working on a new collection which is very much influenced by grief. I lost a very close friend to suicide last year. Actually, on my birthday was the day that she passed away. And I think this experience has really sparked a revisiting for me of all of the things that we would have shared growing up. And also I'm getting to the stage in my life where the things that were cool when I was a teenager are now cool again. I don't know if I don't get to wear the baggy trousers again. I think that's not for me. But lots of things that we would have been really into, things like astrology and the tarot and things like that, that really would have been a huge part of our lives as teenagers, are now really kind of fashionable again, which I think actually has some of it's to do with cycles and some of it's to do with the great state of unrest that we all find ourselves in, and we are looking for signs. But one of the things I found myself thinking about was a lot of the movies that we used to watch together. And also, I think many people growing up in my generation, growing up in the 90s, would have spent a lot of time as children watching Tim Burton movies. I mean, I remember being sat down to watch Beetlejuice and things like that, movies that aren't really suitable for kids, but they seem to be, I mean, even my very kind of conservative, my friend with the really conservative mammy from Mayo would stick us down in front of Beetlejuice and say, this is a kid's movie. And it's not really. And a lot of the gender politics in those movies are really, really troubling when you look back on them, but they would have been very formative for me. So I've written a lot of poems about the movie Beetlejuice, and also loads of poems about Tim Burton's Batman Returns, which of course everybody is waiting for those poems, you know, but I've been having a really good time just kind of revisiting them, and I'm really fascinated by them. I remember being 7 years old when Batman Returns came out, and we all went to the cinema to see it. It was 15s, but like everybody went to see it. It was movies were still kind of an event at that time. But I've been thinking about the moment in that movie where Selina Kyle becomes Catwoman, and here's a little poem about that. Becoming Catwoman. My mother was a secretary like Selina Kyle before Christopher Walken pushed her out a window. Selina, not my mother. My 7-year-old self watched her body slam through awnings, not my mother's body, but Selina's, splatting onto Tim Burton's snowy alleyway. Then the cats come, envelop her like the fur coat that hung in the wardrobe at home, the one she always said was suspiciously tabby-striped, my mother, not Selina. And they lick and lick her, and somehow this reknits her shattered spine. Her arms and legs swivel into place, but her glasses, her large owl eye glasses, my mother's and Selina's, are smashed. And this is the worst, just the worst day, pushed out the window by a man with a speech tic no one mentions because bosses can talk like bosses and push women out of skyscrapers. And it's like, oh, bad day at the office. And up she gets and makes her way home to her little girl apartment, so we can see she's just been playing at being a woman. She's built herself a toy shop to get lost in, Selina, not my mother, and she freaks the fuck out, splattering walls with black paint, smashing toys, and as a little girl, me, my mother, not Selina. This is just devastating, because it feels like we aren't allowed to have anything soft, no knitted kittens or Kit Kat clocks, because it makes us weak. And the only way to stop men with Struwwelpeter hair from pushing us out of skyscrapers, me, my mother, Selina, is by killing everything dear to us so that no one else can. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to read. I'm going to read a longish poem, but I will fly through it. And in the collection that I'm working on, my friend who died, I address her as the character of Lydia Dietz from the movie Beetlejuice, who's played by Winona Ryder, really kind of iconic character. And some of the poems are kind of more intertwined with that Beetlejuice world. And this one has a lot more of my friend in it, and it's written in a number of very small fragments that were written kind of immediately in the aftermath of her death. I've been meaning to say, Lydia. Lydia, it's Friday night again. I've a nagging in my backpack. Let's haunt a laneway until the rest can't put up with our shit anymore. This is happening now. I swear it. Be here tonight. Recurring dream these past months. I'm carrying a friend, never you, grinning like a slashed turnip, a grown woman sleeping in my arms. I perpetrate a massacre on my fingernails with black cherry nail varnish. It pools near my cuticles like bruises, your poor neck. The only thing I can think to do, I'd put my cold hands on it if I could. Lydia, please finish your dinner. Lydia, please drink your tea. I write a children's book for my daughter called Happy Death Day. In it, 2 girls are twinned across time and space when one dies on the other's birthday. Lydia, if I say no to my second daughter, she will stop what she's doing and look at me. If I say no to my first daughter, she will never, ever stop. For a moment, I imagine us both sitting at your table, but inside your kitchen cupboard is the chalk dust floor of school, and at the end of the corridor, the stairwell where we skipped science, and in the class, the Bunsen burner gifts you the flame that burns down your flat. And outside the door are your flatmates, boyfriends, father, sister, all milling like atoms, and in the middle, a wicker coffin. I spin it all around. I can't find your phone number. When I look out the window at the dark, all I see is me. Lydia, all the food in your fridge has gone bad. It doesn't matter anyway. All this is just a film reel unspooling all over the floor. When we're both gone, we can take it all back with us, swallowing Tsar bombas with our vodkas. In the story, the living girl asks the dead girl to come back, but the dead girl ghosts her. Hatchery of scars tattooed over, living craquelure, flesh animated from chin to toe, your neck. Your baby's moon face radiates joy. She's the spit of you. Her joy is the thing that moved inside you like a snake. I never told you the snake is what I loved. This snake I wrapped my jealousy around. My mind's eye visits you in your wicker bed. Soon we will not recognize each other anymore. She would have had a fire in her brain, he says, and I think of Yeats and his hazelwood. It's like a burning, he says, golden apples, as if I didn't know. But of course, he wouldn't know I know about the wood, the smell such burning makes. She should have shown the wood. We would have known, had we known, they could have known. She knew about the wood, had she shown the burning in the brain, a silver apple hovering outside her window, moon in cooling mug. Lydia, where are your dogs? Are they scratching at the door? Who has your children? I dream myself to your kitchen where something moves, claw on tile, weight of tongue, slap on jaw. Let it out? Let it die? Another house, another kitchen. Your mum pours a midday gin, tells her miscarriages like rosary beads. Another house, another kitchen. Your granny passed out on the sofa. We pour a thick salt circle all over her bare floorboards. I push you and you fall backwards into it. Every time you stand up, I push you again and again. I won't stop till you're safe. Funeral fantasy. I lift your baby from your husband's arms and take her home to where the sunlight licks the roof tiles of Edenmore, Coolock, Kilmore, Artane, and the men in the bookies wave at the women in the beauticians, and Rifat in the shop gives my older daughter a lollipop, and she says, we have a new baby. And the baby smiles your smile, and I smile my smile, and Rifat smiles his smile. In the movie of the book, the living girl says, I can't keep you here anymore. Lydia, I went back to our school. Everything had shifted 90 degrees, so all the nuns' hidden corridors were jutting up out of the ground and into the sky. I kept lurching sideways, and the nuns were falling up the stairs. I could hear the teeth rattle in their skulls, and I wanted to shout that you had died, but knew no one would remember your name. And oh, the sun shone out of the faces of all the happy children, and it's nice that we can visit. But now we must admit that neither of us is ever going home again. And I'll finish. And I'll finish with just a little poem that I've dedicated to the Cork poet Victoria Kennefic, and she'd written a wonderful poem about an egg cleanse, and we were chatting about this, and I thought an egg cleanse was some sort of dietary thing where you drank a load of raw eggs and it was supposed to make you feel better, but no, it's this kind of ritual that various different cultures have done around the world, which you're supposed to kind of cleanse your aura with an egg, and the egg takes on all of the bad vibes. So we were chatting about that, and I wrote a poem in response to her poem. Magpie Heart for Victoria Kennefic. What surprises me most about the egg cleanse is that every time I touch the egg to my heart, I start to cry, and I find myself saying aloud, my poor heart, like it's the chick from the egg hatched into a magpie, crouched against a garden wall, not yet able to fly. I feel so much for it, this fledgling, so neatly harlequined, so almost become itself, though it would gut a nest of robins if it could. I think of all the energy expended on all of it, the gestation and cracking of a blue egg, the slow feathering of a bird, and for what? Little ravenous hearts skulking in every corner, their blood thrashing round frail circulatory systems, their endings taking place, for the most part, out of sight. Thank you very much.
Wow, Gurmina Malka, Jessica. What a beautiful tribute to your beautiful friend, Gurmina Malka. And you really have the unique ability to share such dark work in such a soothing way. So thank you very much for that. That's very powerful. And as a huge fan of both Beetlejuice and Batman Returns, I'm very excited about your new collection, Gurmina Mahgat. So maybe a Bula Boss for our 3 poets this evening. That's Rónán, Snodaigh, Dylan Brennan and Jessica Traynor. We're going to have a little Q&A. Nothing too long, I don't think. People might need a bit of a breather just to absorb all those beautiful words. Just after hearing the 3 readers, I suppose one thing that I find I've in common with you is the fact that we all clearly write to process difficult times, emotions, observations, whatever you like. I recently set myself the challenge of trying to write about something beautiful. I said I'm going to write a poem about something beautiful, and it ended up being a bit of a piss take, to be honest. I'm not sure where I'll go with it, but I'd love to ask you, do you try to write about, a beautiful moment you experience, thinking I'm going to put that in a poem, or I'm going to try to express that in verse? I'd just love to know your take on that. Is this something you try to do, you'd like to do, your thoughts around that in general, to be honest? Can I bring you back up, Jessica? Is that okay while you're still in the zone of, before your heart rate goes back to normal? Come on up, yeah.
That's such an interesting question, actually. And I think I do try to write about beautiful things, but I think I try and write about the beautiful things that surprise me, or that are kind of tinged with other emotions that are a bit surprise, that blindside me slightly. And often those things are kind of inextricable from a full range of emotions. So I would very rarely find myself in the headspace where I could kind of go out on that clear spring morning and just look around and go, everything is 100% brilliant. Like there's always 10% of other things coming into it. But I suppose what I hope is that I'm finding beauty in unexpected places. Because I think that's what we really need to look for to get us through, is the beauty in the complicated.
And you're absolutely spot on. I probably word in a way, it's more happiness, I suppose. Do you know what I mean? I love darkness, it's beautiful to me. But yeah, happiness, I guess, is what I was trying to say, maybe more so than beautiful. I get happiness as opposed to beautiful, perhaps.
It's funny. I rarely find myself. I think when I'm really happy, I'm in the moment, so I'm not writing. But I think that's probably the answer. Is that I'm when we are in those moments of happiness, of actual happiness, as opposed to maybe contentment.
Contentment.
Because I think I would probably very rarely write about pure happiness, because I'm just out having the crack then. That's brilliant. I'm happy out. But contentment, because contentment is more complicated. Contentment has a kind of a patina to it, which is sometimes made up of little bits of boredom or irritation or other things. But it's contentment that gets us through, isn't it? Rather than those kind of highs of emotion.
Totally. You're Margot, Jessica. I'm curious, are you familiar with the music of Katie Kim? She's beautiful, a Waterford woman, a beautiful soundscape artist, singer. Her music to me, it's as dark as you get, but as beautiful as you get. But yeah, I guess I meant more happiness, those moments where you think, oh wow, isn't that so beautiful? Isn't this so lovely? I personally would never be inspired to write about that. Not that there's, I like reading about that, but I'm just curious to know, would you ever find yourself? I might continue with Dylan, then we'll come on to you, Rónán. Is that okay? Dylan, would you mind jumping in there?
Hi, yeah. Thanks for the question. Well, I suppose I was trying to, a few days ago, look for this quote by Tom Waits, and then either I figured out maybe I can't find it, or it never existed in the first place, or I imagined it, or it's one of those memes with a fake quote on it. But it was something about, tell me a sad story, but sing it beautifully. And sort of that's something I'm certainly interested in. But also, without getting too highfalutin, the Stoic idea of you can't have the night without the day, and that tension between good and bad, and sort of I'm interested in everything from, and I live usually in Mexico City, which I find a great metaphor, because it's like everything is there, from the ridiculous to the sublime, from the horror to just magnificence, everything. So I'm, what a terrible answer, but I'm interested in everything, and that includes the horror and the pain, but also happiness. So that poem I read there, 4 attempts at making a human, I mean, it's about failed attempts at human reproduction, but it ends with a successful attempt. And so I really want to write poems, type of poems I want to read, that appeal to the head and the heart. And if they can do both of those things simultaneously, that's what I'm after in what I read and what I write.
Gurmíle Mágad, Dylan. That was lovely and articulate. Gurmíle Mágad. Rónán, would you like to give us your insight? At the hall? Níl Brewert.
I suppose a lot of things were going through my head when I was listening to Jess again. So, the thing that I landed on at the end, I remember me ma, she wasn't keen on that word happiness. I suppose near of Gael games and take anyway, so we'd talk about a word sometimes. But she's that's an American concept. Pointless. Absolute pointless activity. That's an interesting thing for someone to say. So, and then when I was sitting down, I was thinking of that song. There's a song called Perfect Day by Lou Reed, isn't it? Isn't that a perfect example of just being really happy? I don't think it's occurred to me to start writing when I'm really happy yet. Do you know?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, and that's an interesting insight there to our Irishness, I suppose. I relate happiness to sunshine, and what do we know? We know damp, I'm not sure what are the emotions to relate to that, but probably not happiness. Something else I was just thinking myself, and these are pure selfish questions. For me personally, I'm very excited by the idea of collaboration as an artist, as a writer, whether it's with music, dance, film. I'd love to know what importance or significance do collaborations play in your practice as an artist? Rónán, can I bring you back up when we do it in the opposite direction? Is that okay? Gurmíle Mágad. So collaborations, no fibre, but collaborations, like what importance or significance do collaborations play in your practice as an artist? Kjol, Skamon, I know, yeah.
Just philosophically, I don't know, to make quite a tree. Like if I haven't grown out of myself now, there's something wrong. So I've been spending a lot of time since I was Quaga. Quaga was my half time, I thought. I can't count past 100 Quagas half time, up the hill, down the hill. To Shin Dainta, I gave myself a year to say everything I've said all over the time. And now I'm trying to grow out of myself. Do you know what I mean? Which is a weird experience, because you're leaving caricatures of yourself as you do it, and you're not in the being that you created. So in saying that, I've kind of started losing interest in myself, which is weird. I'm growing out of myself. But what I am enjoying, and it's been what I've pursued in the last 3 years, is collaboration. Nothing else makes sense to me. As a kid, I love playing football, I love playing anything to do with other people when I'm playing, engage with them. Yeah, I love it because I don't have to think about myself. I'm a good team player, you know. So yeah, collaboration is the way to go.
Yeah, that's a nice image there I got from what you said, Rónán. Falling, kind of stepping away from yourself or something, but don't fall out of love with yourself anyway. And Jessica, can we jump in back with you again? Sin all right, Ladol?
Yeah, I've been very lucky to do lots of collaborations over the past couple of years, and I think some of it is because I worked in theatre for a really long time. I was a dramaturg and I worked in the Abbey as literary manager, and I got to know lots of people who were working in lots of different areas of the theatre world, and actually theatre is a very healthy place, I think, for artists to be involved in, because even though there are all the personalities that there are in every art form, at the end of the day everybody just has to make the show. Which I think could be a good thing for writers who are often very isolated to come across. But because I got to know loads of people like sound designers, dance artists, people like that, I found myself being asked to do a few completely wild commissions where, I mean, a couple of years ago for Galway 2020, now it did end up getting postponed, but I was asked if I could write the libretto to a major community opera. And I kind of said, I don't know, can I? Okay, I'll give it a shot. And I did, and then I had this wonderful experience of working with a composer, with opera directors, with Irish National Opera, with singers, with musicians. I mean, just brilliant stuff, and that is what sustains me actually, because I think, like all of us, I can be in my head a lot, and I love what Rónán said there about the losing interest in the self, and I think sometimes for me collaboration achieves that to an extent. You know, you're one tiny cog in this thing that's much greater than you, and that's a wonderful thing to see, and it's a wonderful vantage point to have. I think it's very important.
Fair play to you. Libretto for an opera, wow. Yeah, and I think you touched the nail on the head there when you said, like, if you're working with someone else, you might feel more pushed to kind of actually reach the deadline. You know what I mean? We have to do something here. Whereas on your own, you're kind of floating around at your desk going, oh, I'll work on this today, that. But I think if you're working with someone else, you might you know, might be a symbiotic thing. You're pushing each other to kind of to get done what you've promised to get done. Gurmina Magat. Dylan, Ervishtalat, would you mind giving us your insight there?
Sure, but before I do, I got a message from my publisher, Laura, that she ran home to get some copies of my book, and so I think they are available. They're on sale there, just so you know. Yeah, yeah. Round of applause for Laura. Well done. Thank you. What was I going to say? Yeah, I'd love to collaborate more, but you know, I suppose through different factors, I haven't done that much, and when I have, it's been with family members, and it's been great. But maybe it's because it's easier to guilt trip them into working with me. But for example, that poem I read, Stoneflower, my wife made a lithograph that goes with that poem, and we made it into a very limited number of broadsheets. And then with my older brother, Jonathan Brennan, he's based in Belfast. He's a multimedia artist, and I collaborated on an ebook and an exhibition with lithographs. No, lino cuts, and then we did that film together, and he's actually flying into Monterrey. I'm on sabbatical, so I'm kind of in different parts of Mexico. I'm in Guadalajara right now, not for the book fair, just a coincidence, but he's flying over in January, and with a view to doing some film work inspired by some of my poems. So that's something I'm really excited about. Who know, I don't want to put too much pressure on it. We'll see what happens. Well, yeah, I'm more than happy to collaborate. Sometimes you get surprised. I got tagged on Instagram by a visual artist who'd read my book and made some prints, and I saw them, and they look like these crazy black scribbles, and I thought, my God, my book has broken his brain. But then I looked at them again, and they're kind of beautiful in a weird way. So yeah, it's surprising and fantastic to collaborate, and I'd be open for more collaboration.
Gurmina Magat, Dylan, you've fun, exciting times to look forward to, I'd say, and yeah, wishing you all the best and looking forward to your new work going forward as well, Gurmina Magat. So we're going to finish there. Jessica, Rónán, August, Dylan, Gurmina Magat. Yeah, we're going to finish the evening there, and I begs for... Yeah, we're going to finish this part of the evening, Paul. Sorry about that, I forgot there was another part of the evening, sorry. Yeah, sorry, don't go away. Gurmíle maithagah, Ihuwa agus bunigi súpas an godela dadiha. Gurmagah, slán.
All right, I'm logging out. Bye bye, everyone.
Basically.